So let's look at water consumption. This is something that I am not as familiar with. I'm not a tech person. That's outside my specialty. I'm not going to pretend that it's something that I am familiar with. So let's get a bit of an idea for what some of the literature says about that. This is an interesting one because, when I clicked on this article, it just doesn't seem to exist. That's not something that traditionally you run into with research. Most often you might see something about a retraction or an edit or a revision. This one just disappeared. And that's something that kind of makes me suspicious that someone didn't like what it said. Fortunately, I was able to find the actual article itself. And in that article, it says specifically that the variation in what's been noted for water use is like 10,000 times. There's a huge amount of variability, and that is concerning. How are we supposed to know how much water is being used if there's so much variation? Turns out there's not really any regulation. There aren't really any policies in place about water use, and it would be really helpful if there were. But let's see what we can find in terms of actual concrete numbers. Here we have a huge range, 312.5 to 764.6 billion liters of water. That's a lot of water. It's a lot more than I use when I take a shower. There's still a huge variation there, but at least we're getting somewhere. Lots and lots of water. When we don't have a lot of other evidence, we can always turn to anecdotal evidence. It's not as high of quality, but it is something. So let's see what articles we're able to find about people's experience with it. We can see that rural towns might be running out of water. Some of these areas that need water maybe even more than others are running out. Oh yeah, actually, so it turns out there's a ton of articles talking about this. Tons of places are running out of water. Water use is going crazy, and a lot of water seems to be disappearing from vulnerable communities that are rural and in deserts. So in summary, the water consumption seems to be pretty much unregulated. It seems to be unclear, potentially even directly hidden, because we're not getting reliable numbers from data centers about their water use. It does seem to be a lot still, and it seems to be specifically, or at least in particular, affecting people who really need water to survive, probably people who live somewhere anticipating water to be available and are having difficulty acquiring it.